Okay, good morning again. Those who are joining online, please confirm whether you can hear and see me quickly. Right, thanks, Samaru. Okay, so we started our new section last week, right? So it was now, so far we had discussed about the microeconomic context of economy, right? About the demand, supply. Now, listen, everyone, right? For the next 3 hours, I'm the one who's speaking. Okay? And I can give a 20 minutes break, definitely. So it's 2 hours and 40 minutes. So we started discussing about the domestic economy, and I have done a certain part. Up to a certain extent, we have completed. But since most of you are not there, I'll give a small recap, right? I started it definitely because most of you are not there that day. That's why we started, right? So domestic economy. So far, we were talking about the demand, supply, price mechanism, and all these things on an individual company basis, right? So in a micro level. So when it comes to economics, it can be discussed under two aspects, which is the microeconomic part of it and the macroeconomic part of it, right? So we had completed the microeconomic section, and then we moved actually into the macroeconomic context of the economy. So under that, we started learning about the domestic economy. So domestic economy can be studied on the 4 basic areas I explained. Policy goals of a government, which included the growing economy, inflation, creating jobs, reducing the unemployment levels, and so on. And then modules and frameworks, which included the circular flow of funds, how to apply the supply, money supply, demand arguments, and everything. And then policy options, which is basically in a country when you take the economy, you have two basic policies, which is the monetary policy and the fiscal policy. So monetary policy, we have already discussed, right? How the monetary policy works. Who has the power in managing the monetary policy in a country? Who manages that? Can't hear. Central bank, right? So monetary policy is basically handled by the central bank. That is where the liquidity position of the country, or how the money flow, how the money comes into the economy and how the money comes out of the economy is decided by the central bank. That is the monetary policy. Fiscal policy, who is responsible for the fiscal policy? What do you mean by fiscal policy? Fiscal. What is fiscal? What is fiscal, guys? Yes? Can't remember. Taxation, yes. Taxes. So who manages the taxes of a country? Yes? The government, right? So two basic economic policies, fiscal policy and the monetary policy. Monetary policy is basically handled by the central bank of a country. That is where the money supply or the how money comes into the economy and how money comes out of the economy is decided upon. And the fiscal policy is the taxation system, which is decided and controlled by the government time to time, right? That was policy options. Then achieving policy goals, policies that could be implemented to try to achieve the policy goals, right? So these are the 4 basic areas we just need to focus our attention on when it comes to the macroeconomics, and we'll be discussing about each and every part. So then we moved on. Then we moved on to the macroeconomics and the government policy goals. So as I mentioned previously also, we looked at the interaction of supply and demand in individual markets. Macroeconomics focuses on the workings of economy as a whole, right? That's the basic difference you will have to keep in your mind. In macroeconomics, in microeconomics, what we focused on was on individual markets, right? On individual markets. Now, we are going to discuss about the economy as a whole, where what we learned as demand, we'll be discussing as aggregate demand. What we discussed as supply, we'll be discussing as aggregate supply and henceforth. So the overall aggregate demand, output of goods and services, supply of factors of production, income earned by providers of factors of production and all these, and most importantly, the government policy, right? Government macroeconomic policy. So under my macroeconomics, the basic two policies which is there in the country in the economics is, as we just said, the monetary policy and the fiscal policy. So we just have to pay whatever the decisions taken by the government and whatever the actions taken by the government as a critical role, and we'll have to pay more attention about that when it comes to learning macroeconomics, right? About the macroeconomics part I'm discussing. So there were four basic options, four basic factors in macroeconomics, this, right? Then we are moving on to one of the factors one by one. First one is policy goals, right? So when it comes to a government, right, when it comes to a government, every government has four of these policy goals, right? Can you say that louder? First one is growth. Secondly, inflation. Thirdly, can't hear. Unemployment. Fourth one, balance of payments, right? So when now you might have seen in your television or whatever the social media or wherever, the governments might be speaking about when it comes to the economy, right? We hear all the time that the government is concerned about the economy and the economy and the economy. So the basic four factors they are focusing on when it comes to the economy of a country is this, right? Firstly, the growth, then the inflation, then the unemployment, balance of payments. I'm quite sure you might have heard all the four words by now, right? Before learning this, not that I just told them last week, but before that even you might have heard. So when it comes to economic growth, most governments want economic growth. Growth should result in the following: more goods being demanded and produced, people earning more people should have jobs. So in an economy, why do economic growth do matter? If I ask you like that. So this is like more of a discussion. All these things are practical, quite practical, right? So why do you think an economic growth is required? Do a country require economic growth? Yes or no? Those who say there should be an economic growth. Or else the second option is we can keep the same momentum for a period of like 25 years without any growth, but the economy retains as the same. That's not the case. Every government requires an economic growth. So economic growth happens like this. That should result in more goods being demanded and produced, people earning more and can afford more goods, right? So when it comes to the economic growth, producers, now we understood that when it comes to the demand aspect and the supply aspect, there should be like people who is consuming the goods and services and also the people who are producing all these. So if we are to say that there is an economic growth, more of these products and services should be produced, right? Let's say, let's take one particular type of a good. Let's say biscuits. So rather than having two business manufacturers in the country, it contributes vastly in an economy if we have 10 biscuit manufacturers. So if we have 10 business manufacturers, consumers might have a variety of choices. You can select, I'll go ahead with this chocolate flavored one. Yes. I can go ahead with this vanilla flavored one, whatever. More choices. So if we are to say that there is an economic growth, there should be more goods and services being produced in an economy. And there's no point if you produce if the people don't consume. So you should produce and also you should consume, which is there should be a considerable amount of demand as well. Consumers should request for it. So if the consumers are to request for the increasing supply, what should happen? Imagine my salary is 50,000 this month. Next month also 50,000. and for the eternity, it's 50,000, theoretically, right? So if my salary is 50,000 and there are more goods and services being produced, government comes up with a lot of stuff, right? So if my salary remains the same, can I afford to buy these? Can I afford to buy these, guys? No. So as a result, if an economy to grow, in one aspect, I can say goods and services, the amount of goods and services produced should increase, and at the same time, people should earn more and should be able to afford these, right? So if not, you can understand, as we discussed under the demand and supply, right? Just like we discussed under the demand and supply, that will not come onto a equilibrium, right? So in the longer term, more people will produce and produce, but there will be no point because there is no demand. People is not, consumers are not buying. So after all, that will, whatever being produced in the longer term will have to be wasted away, right? So people's income level or earnings should increase as well if we are to say that there is a economic growth. And then more people should have jobs, quite obvious, I don't need to explain. On the face of it, therefore, growth should result in an improved standard of living. That's important. So when all these things just increase, the standard of living of a country will increase. Then we discuss key issues in terms of economic growth as well, right? Key issues in economic. So that I'm not going to explain because this area we discussed last week. So the second factor, first factor was economic growth. Second factor was inflation. Simply put into words, inflation was a basket of essential or whatever the goods you purchase in 1 month. If you can't afford to buy that with the same price, if the price has increased of the same basket of goods and services which you purchased in the previous month, when it comes to the latter month, that is known as inflation. So general price levels getting increased, right? So if I put that in a definition, it was inflation is when the price of goods and services generally increase over time, which means your money buys less than it used to. So by spending 5,000 rupees, if you can buy a basket of goods this month, and by using the same amount 5,000 rupees in the next month, if you can't buy the same amount goods, it's said to be inflation. So those who were there last week and those who were not there, just tell me, if I say inflation is something good, do you agree or not? Those who agree, I asked the same one question last week also. Those who are not agreeing, right? So it's a good thing, right? In our perspective, when it comes to the individual perspective, it's not good. In the perspective of a consumer, inflation is not good. So if I'm the consumer, whatever the goods and services I could buy this month, I can't buy the same amount stuff for the same price next month. So in the consumer's perspective, it's not good. But still, in the macroeconomic context, you are supposed to be economist, right? Economics subject. So think like economics. So in the perspective of an economist, right, inflation should be there. Why? Inflation leads to growth. When the country, our country experienced drastic economic collapses over the past 5 years, right? 2019 is the Sunday bomb attack, right? 2020, COVID-19 pandemic. 2021, that person. Family, biggest family, right? That disaster. Okay. 2021 onwards, economic downturn, we say, right? So since 2019, we were having some sort of a drastic economic collapse, but still, by now, the central bank has announced, all the time the central bank has the inflation target. We call it a flexible inflation target and it's said to be maintained at 5% by now. So having such sort of disasters at such sort of a scenario as well, we are having an inflation target. Why? Inflation should be there. So if the general price levels continue to be the same for the past 5 years and another 5 years forward, will the producers will be induced to produce anything? Definitely not. If the price levels keep the same, they will not produce. So if they don't produce, what will happen? The equilibrium will be affected. The demand side will be affected as well. Price levels will, I don't know where it will end. So as a result, inflation is something good. Inflation is required for a country. Okay. So every country requires to maintain the inflation at a general level. So then most government want stable prices and low inflation. Most reasons includes inflation causes uncertainty and stifles business investments, and whatever we discussed all these things. And most importantly, high inflation can affect savings in different ways. This is something important. When it comes to savings, right? Inflation will lead to affect the savings in two different ways. Read the first sentence. What does it say? You can read it louder. Inflation. Yes, inflation. I hear only. Be energetic, guys. So just the morning. Read. It erodes. Okay. Right. It erodes. Inflation erodes the future purchasing power of money. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by purchasing power? Yes. Purchasing power is the ability of buying something by paying a certain amount. Right? So it erodes the future purchasing power of money. So people may decide to save less but spend more now. In one perspective, one part of the economy might think, so inflation is rising, right? Inflation is rising. So as a result, whatever the goods and services I buy today, I will not be able to buy it the next month or the after. So why saving? No need. We'll just chill, right? So we'll just continue to purchase more and more stuff right now. Because why? Future purchasing power of the people, money, right? Future purchasing power of the money, it's eroding and eroding due to inflation. So some people, right? Some people might think, right? Some people might think why do we save now? We'll spend more and more. Some people. But the other set, the opposite way, the other people might think higher prices reduces individuals' real wealth and so they spend less. Some of the people might think there's no point in spending because now the inflation is really high. So what we can purchase is really less. So we shall spend it. No, we shall not spend it. We will continue to save. We shall save and save and save and keep, right? So after all, after some time, once the inflation level is lower, we shall continue to spend. So there are two basic perspectives when it comes to the savings, how higher inflation might affect, right? We discussed that as well. Then unemployment, the third factor. Unemployment, even in a very healthy economy, some unemployment will arise as people change jobs. However, mass unemployment is a problem due to the following. I think we examined even in very developed economies, we find a particular percentage of unemployment, right? If any government, there's no any government where 100% employment is guaranteed, right? Unemployment is there, at least a small percentage. I think we found out the UK's one, no? It was around 2%, 4%. It was around 4%. So unemployment is a problem. So unemployment is created by the people tend to change jobs. Now, when it comes to the modern context, what do you think? Will the people like to stick into a job for 20 to 25 years or will the people would like to change it? Those who say would like to change, what will you do? And you will retain. Those who retain. So previously it was not the case, right? So when people started to work, job security was not that, right? Because of the fact people continue to stay in the same organization for like 40 years and then retire, right? Even in the organization where I do work, it's the same. There are many people who has the service more than 25 years, right? They retire working in the same organization for the 40 years. I'm not that old by the way. For my little experience, I'm telling you. But now it's not the case. The people do change, right? So you'll have to remember now, in the modern context, don't stick into an organization more than 5 to 10 years. You know why? The corporate world or the employers do think it in a different way. Now, if you continue to work in a 20 to 25 years in the same organization, if I'm the employee, I'm the employer, what my thinking is, right? What my thinking is, I'm thinking this person has been employed only in one discipline. Only one culture. When it comes to an organization, there are several cultures, right? Culture is different. Now, if you are working in a bank to bank, the culture is varied. If you are working in some other corporate, the culture is different in different organizations. So what do employers require in the modern world is you should have worked in several cultures, right? So you have wealth of experience, you know how to stick into each and every culture. So you won't get the same on experience if you continue to work for 20 years in the same organization. You know only one culture. That's the disadvantage, right? So now it's the case. So for you guys, I don't know. Just work in one company 5 to 6 years, take the maximum, take the exposure, gain the experience, move to another, gain the experience, and climb up the corporate ladder like this. Okay, so that's how it works. So unemployment, that is that. And then balance of payments, right? So we discussed that any country, there is no country where they can like stand alone without doing any imports and exports. Now we have recently seen that joker, Donald Trump, how he behaves, right? So he wants to put tariffs everywhere. He wants to minimize the imports. He want every company to come into US and do the working there. That won't have utter unfairly, right? So it was an utter failure. Though he like incorporated reciprocal tariffs, it didn't work. They can't, because every country, it's like now previously it was globalization, it was then global village, and now it's global family. So every country needs the other country. So imports and exports is there. So this is where we talk about that factor. Imports and exports. So that is up to a country to decide whether imports should be high or whether exports should be high, right? But generally in the economic terms, if the exports are high, that's the better push. Because when exports are high, more and more income is flowing into the country when you do exports. So when you are doing imports, when you're like importing the every shit, right? Wherever possible, you are importing everything. If you are doing that, you'll have to spend money in that, right? So you'll have to have foreign currency. So that will lead to a balance of payments problem. So their long-term trade deficit happens where imports is high rather than exports with a net position of money leaving the country. And then we discussed this long-term surplus. Imports, exports is the higher factor, which is better, right? So that is about the 4 factors: economic growth, inflation, unemployment, and then about balance of payments. And then we went to something interesting, which is freight cycles. Many economies exhibit fluctuations in economic activity over time, right? Even the US economy, even the UK economy, whatever, it has cycles. It is not in the best position ever for the rest of the 100 years. That is not. Economies do fail, and then economies have a trough, and then economy has an expansion peak. This is the cycle how it goes. There's a cycle, trade cycle, that's it, right? So there's definitely a recession period, trough period, expansion peak, again likewise. What should governments try to do is two things. So those who were there, what are the two things the government should try in terms of this trade cycle? Anybody who remember? What's the first factor? There were two important things a government should target when it comes to a trade cycle. What's it? Can't remember. Yes. First factor, very important. You can't change the fact that you have this cycle, right? You can't change it. That happens. But a government should try, ultimately, when these cycles happen, they should try to maintain the trend like this. See, they can maintain the trend like this also, and they can maintain the trend like this as well. So in the longer term, what has happened, although these several cycles is there likewise, right? In the longer term, it has experienced the increasing trend, which is with time, output levels has increased. If with time, the output level remain the same, that is a problem. So you have experienced economic cycles, but that is maintained at a constant level, at a horizontal level, that's a problem. So if the output levels are decreasing, definitely will go to hell as a country, right? You know an example, no? You know an example? I'm not going to, right? So this is an increasing trend. So factor number one, the government should try to maintain an increasing trend even though you have economic cycles in the longer term, right? Second factor, the government should try, you anyway have a recession, you anyway have a trough, and then you anyway have expansion, you anyway have a peak. Next one is, the government should try to maximize the period in which the economy is in peak and minimize the period in which the economy is in recession. So if the country is in recession, the government should try to minimize the period in which the economy is in recession. Quickly take actions, quickly launch strategies, whatever the strategies, then come out of the recession and then move on a increasing trend. That's the second factor the government should try. So now, can you understand the two factors the government should try? Everyone? Right. So then we are moving forward. Economic diamond, right? Economic diamond. So a lot of factors to remember. So initially, under macroeconomics, fundamentally, we have four options to think of, four factors to think of, right? Policy options, policy goals, and whatever. Then as a government, what should be tried, what should be focused on? Four factors: inflation, unemployment, growth, and balance of payments. And then we came to economic diamond, which is the economy's performance and the success of economic policy is the economic diamond showing the main economic objectives of a government. I told that there's another diamond in your syllabus. What was that? Diamond necklaces. Then what was the other diamond? Porter's diamond, right? Remember, competitive advantage, national advantage for the companies when they are moving forward, when they are expanding. Remember that as well. But this is economic diamond. So when it comes to economic diamond, there are four basic economic objectives of the government. See, main economic objectives of the governments is this four. price stability, right? Full employment, external balance of employing long-term, whatever economic growth. Economic diamond. So economic diamond is just a diagram which should be showing, right? Which shows the main economic objectives of the governments, and it can be depicted using this. In terms of the economic diamond, remember what are the 4 basic factors affecting it, that's it, right? So those are the economic objectives of a government. So this was the economic diamond. This is economic diamond. So if you can't see that this shape is diamond, be in your imaginary world and think that this is a diamond. Think this is a diamond, this is what I'm referring to, economic diamond. So for 4 basic factors: inflation, unemployment you have, current account balance you have, and then the economic growth as a percentage of GDP, right? So when the economic diamond get expanded and expanded, that's better, right? So that's about it. So the economic diamond. Then did we do these 2 questions? Right. So this is where we start. This is where we actually stop, right? National income. Today, which I'm going to discuss, is national income and the circular flow model, right? Before learning it, remember there are a few basic symbols which you have to keep in your mind. So Y would be representing national income. Y. C, consumption. S, savings. I, investments. T, taxation. G, government expenditure. X for exports, right? X for exports. M for imports. X, exports, right? Several symbols. Imagine a simple economy in which there are only producers and consumers, households. Look at this diagram, guys. Look at this diagram. So here, okay, this economy does not have a government. Really good. If an economy doesn't have a government, and it does not trade with the rest of the world, so good. Nor does have any private sector investments taking place. No comment about. So think of an economy where there is no any government, right? No government. And then no international trade taking place. So as we discussed on the microeconomics part, households is there, firms or the producers is there, right? So whatever the stuff being produced, right? Whatever the stuff being produced is being consumed by households. So consumption happens this way. As a result, how does it actually work? Think in an economy. Only producers and only consumers. Tell me, for the households to purchase goods and services, from where do they get this income? Now, this is a closed system. This system is closed, right? No movement out, no movement in. See, does not trade with the rest of the world. If that is the case, if that is the simple economy, how will the households get money? How will the households earn